tell you a bit about the principles or values that underpin this approach. Now, I've got this on a handout. Do you prefer handouts in advance or afterwards? I never can quite make my mind up, really. Do I get some sense of whether you like this handout first or later? Later. There we go. These are the principles that underpin this perhaps slightly strange concept of positive behaviour. You need to feel fairly comfortable with these principles because the practicalities, the strategies that follow depend on the principles which underpin them. If you aren't comfortable with the principles, you will be not comfortable with the strategies. A lot of what I will talk about over the next half an hour will come across to you as common sense, some of it anyway. What I would ask you to consider is, whilst it is common sense, is it common practice? One of my key messages to schools, I think, is that there is no difference in terms of the practices, the philosophy that we employ in terms of developing what you might call curriculum or academic skills, as there is in terms of developing good behaviour. If it's right for the curriculum, it's right in terms of behaviour. Mostly, when I ask teachers, do you think that schools are about developing the whole child? Do you think they're about developing the social, behavioural, emotional side of children as well as their academic skills, if I can use that slightly crude term? Most people who work in schools will say, yes, absolutely. We think that's what it's about. Good. But there's a catch. The catch is that having said that, my belief and my experience is that we are not as well organised, we are not as thoughtful, we do not put the same kind of resources, organisation, structure into developing behaviour as we do into developing academic skills. I suppose that's a historical thing in some senses, that maybe, I don't know, we thought that behaviour was really somebody else's job. But it manifestly isn't. It manifestly is part of our jobs, people that work in schools. So, one of the things that we need to accept, I think, is that, right, as I say, it's right for the curriculum. If we think it's important to develop the social, behavioural, emotional side, and if we think that that's the same as developing academic skills, then here are some of the principles that it seems to me to common sense to apply. Have in mind the behaviour you're looking for. Number one, can you imagine walking into a class of children, a group of children, saying, good morning, now today, don't do the Romans in Britain. I'm not going to tell you what you are going to do, but I will tell you this, do not under any circumstances do the Romans in Britain today. If you do the Romans in Britain today, lad, and you are in trouble. Now, we wouldn't say that, would we? We do not say, right, I'm going to teach you how to do long multiplication today. Now, long multiplication, do not put this number here, do not put that number there. Under no circumstances times that number by that number, and do not do this here. Okay, got that, everybody? Off you go. Now, if we were serious about developing a particular skill, an academic skill, we'd want to be able to define what that skill was. We'd want to be able to say to ourselves and to the children, this is what you do. Now, I think I'm not the only person in this room who spends most of his time with his own children saying, don't do that, stop that, I don't like that. Pack that in. I mean, as I go through all these, I'm going to have to hold my hand up here straight away, otherwise it's going to be the bolt of lightning through the ceiling if I don't come clean. I'm talking about all these principles. I genuinely believe they are correct. I have great difficulty putting them into practice, hence the common sense, but not necessarily common practice. My 19-year-old daughter, one of her favourite lines to me is, "What's your job?" Are you the positive behaviour person, Dad? Are you the person that goes around schools telling people to be positive to children? Well, that wasn't very positive. And I usually say something like, "Just shut up, Kenny. I don't want to hear it." So, there's a real common sense notion too, that we should be telling them what we want them to do behaviour-wise rather than what we want them to stop doing. But a lot of my work in school, has been about trying to persuade teachers to get rid of negative statements or negative rules. If you have a rule that says no running in the corridor, and the history of discipline in schools has been based on those kind of rules. If schools had rules, they were don't do this, don't do that. That's how we tend to come across rules in society. No smoking, don't run on the grass, etc., etc. So, I don't know whether you believe this or not, but my experience is if you have a rule that says no running in the corridor, you can actually increase the rate of running. Not decrease it, increase it. The reason being that the key word in that rule, in that sentence, is the word running. That's the word that people pay attention to. I'll give you a beautiful example of this. In the days when I had colleagues, when the positive behaviour service was blooming, one lunchtime, colleague said, "I'm going to the sandwich shop for a sandwich. Do you want a sandwich?" I said, "Yes, please." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Bring me anything but salad." You know what he brought me, don't you? He brought me salad because that was the word he picked up on. He was dashing out of the office, just like busy times. Life in school is busy. We don't get much opportunity to communicate with children in school generally, and that situation will be specifically the case under these circumstances. So we almost need to make sure that every word counts when we talk to them about their behaviour. On the whole, I'm generalising here, on the whole they're not right interested in talking about their behaviour or improving it, are they? If they're anything like my kids, I've got about sort of 3 seconds to get it right. And if I blow it in any way, shape or form, and I'll come back later in the day to what blowing it in any way, shape or form is, I can start in a situation with my son where he is dead in the wrong. Absolutely smack bang wallop wrong. But if I don't get it right in the way I intervene, he'll give me about 10 seconds and then he'll start to focus on my behaviour and we've forgotten about his behaviour. So I'll come back to this because I think it's sort of interesting. So, but if it's true generally that we don't have many words to say to them before they start to ignore what we're saying, we've got to make sure those words are right. So if you're driving down the road and you're approaching a crossroad, you come to a crossroad and you don't know which way to go, and you turn to your passenger and say, "Which way do I go now?" And the passenger says, "Well, don't turn left." You wouldn't be thrilled with that as you'd be going around this roundabout, which way do I go? It's like me saying to you, do not think of a green apple. The more I went on about this green apple on the plate that you're not supposed to see, and the stalk coming out of the top of the green apple, the more I went on about it, the more difficult you would find it to resist the notion of this green apple. We need to get more into the habit, some of us anyway, of telling children to think of red apples rather than not to think of green apples. And that is quite a big challenge for some of them. Most of us, what we do is, don't do that. We pick up on their misbehaviour and tell them not to do it without being clear about what we do want them to do instead. I don't mind comments on this as we go along, by the way. It's entirely up to you. I have quite a big audience, so maybe you're not inclined to do that, but it doesn't bother me at all if there are questions. In fact, I prefer more of a conversation to the lecture, to be honest, but I know it's not always possible to do that. Do you buy that first principle? Does that sound reasonable? Yeah, pretty common sense, isn't it? Yeah.